Guys, this build has 50k resists and it does over 6k bash damage. And that means within 0.3 seconds, we can deal about 20k damage instantly, and we can spam that out as much as we want. Check this out. What is going on, guys? It is Venom Surge here, and welcome back to another episode of Elder Scrolls Online. Today we have a build on the Arcanist that I was not really expecting would turn into this monster. Initially I wanted to do a kind of a fun build, and this started to take fruit into something else. So first off, let's take a look at our sets. We are using Armor of the Veiled Heritance. So obviously this is a bash build and this is one of our bash sets. So this comes from Aradon Overworld. You can just buy it from the vendors or you can farm it yourself. It gives you spell damage and weapon damage, armor, and then when you interrupt an enemy, you gain weapon damage and you also deal more bash damage. So on the one hand, we're currently using a mace. Does not matter what type of one hand, but we are using the Oblivion enchant with sharpened. And then on the shield, we're using reinforced with Magicka. On the jewelry, we are using triple infused bash damage. This gives us about 800 damage to each of our bash attacks on each piece of jewelry. Next up, we are using Deadlands Demolisher. Now, Deadlands Demolisher is a crafted set, so you can get this from a crafter or craft it yourself. This gives you max stamina, weapon spell damage, max stamina, and then your bash deals about 900 more damage. And then when you bash, it also does a cone in front of you that interrupts any enemy's hit. And this does a good amount of damage, and it can occur once every 2 seconds, but it also counts as bash damage, which is very important. So we're using this across the body. We're using the prismatic enchant on all the pieces. If you don't want to do that, you could just do max health. Now, everything on the body is reinforced except for the waist and the hands. We actually have those on divines just because they don't gain as much from reinforced, and we get better bash with divines, which I'll get to later. And then on the back bar, we're using the perfected spectral cloak from Black Rose Prison. This is dual wield. When you're on the back bar, you do gain 100 more stam recovery. However, it is not massive, so perfected does not matter a lot. When you activate Blade Cloak while you're in combat, each time it does damage, it will reduce your damage taken and increase your damage done by 6% every 2 seconds, which the Blade Cloak attacks every 2 seconds. So as long as you have Blade Cloak up, you're slightly more tanky and doing more damage with your bash, which is very important. I'm currently using 2 maces. It does not matter as much, but the penetration is very nice. And I am currently using defending on both because I want to stay tanky on my back bar as well. One has flame damage, the other has the crusher enchant. I think it might be better if you move the crusher to your front bar since you are mostly up there. So you might want to do that and just put the Oblivion on there instead. But then we are using a 1 piece of Lord Warden on the shoulder. It doesn't matter if this is Lord Warden, you just want that armor. And this will be also heavy. And this is heavy with the reinforced and tri-stat enchant as well. And then for the helm, we are using Gaze of Sithis. This is a mythic from the Deadlands DLC. This gives you about 3k health, about 1k health recovery, and a 4k armor, but it reduces your block mitigation to 0. If you don't want to lose your block mitigation, you could just put on Lord Warden instead. It'll give you about the same amount of armor, but also to your group around you. However, it will make you more of a stationary fighter rather than mobility, but that is up to you. Once again, prismatic enchant and reinforced. I mainly do this for the armor because if you don't know, the way bash damage scales is it is based on your armor. So if we take a look at our Centurion here, I'm going to take off 1 piece of Deadlands so that way we don't get that extra proc. So we're just going to bash him a bit. So we've got 315, 3315 is about the average on non-crits. If I just put up my armor here, so I just increased my armor, now we're doing 3500. So this is increased based on your armor, not on how much weapon damage you have. I have tested this quite extensively. However, some skills that we use, which you'll see later, do count with weapon damage and bash damage combined, but we'll get to that later. The reason why we have divines on these 2 pieces and reinforced on the rest is because since these armor pieces are less armor points, Initially, I was using the Lady, and Divines would give you more armor than Reinforced. However, after testing, I found we needed more penetration. So currently we are using the Lover Mundus Stone just to get a little bit more penetration, and that is what we're currently using. I hadn't changed these, but I think I do like the amount of penetration we have currently. So first, let's check out our unbuffed stats. So we got about 20k mag, 43k health, and 23k stam. Pretty decent there. We do get about 2800 health recovery, which is pretty good, but we only get 1k mag recovery and stam recovery. We are not focused on damage as much, so that's why it's only about 3300. However, this does affect some skills, but not as much, so we don't care as much about these. Now, for penetration, it says we only get about 6k. However, this does equal to about 18 to 15k with our other skills, which I'll get to later. Unbuffed, we do get about 36k resists and about 2k crit resist. If I buff up here, we do get to 49k resists. That is a lot. And then the recoveries do go up to about 3500 health and 1300 mag and stam. But for those resists, 49k, and we can keep that up at all times very easily. Now, there's a reason why we're so over cap. First off, this is a PvP build, so most people will have a good amount of penetration. You could probably get around 10k on your normal person, and then you might even get more if some people are running other penetrating sets. So you can estimate they're probably going to have about 18k penetration on you, maybe more. Even with that, we're still going to be at cap. So we're very good there. This can be pushed even further if you wanted to take off. Initially, I was using Fortified Brass instead of Veiled Inheritance. And with Fortified Brass, I was running around 57k resist, which is much higher than you really need. But the main reason would be it does help your bash damage. However, we needed that penetration. That's why I swapped to the Lover, and I swapped out Fortified Brass for Veiled Inheritance. Now, just with our normal setup, when we're all buffed up here, we do get about 75% mitigation. However, that does not account for the Black Rose Prison Dagger, as well as the PvP buff. So if we take a look at this, so on the USP skill calculator, this is currently where we're at. I do have an extra buff in here, but that is because of a PvP passive, which you do get at all times. But if we're just being in PvP, it does boost up to about 90% mitigation across the board. Now, if you don't run Gaze of Sithis and you do block, you can get to 96% mitigation. This is also without major protection, by the way. And if you are a vampire with Undeath, you can almost get to 99% mitigation, but that is if you are about to die. So it is not worth it, but this is pretty powerful. However, I do like 90%, and I'm not always going to be blocking because our stam does suffer a tiny bit. So I'm fine with 90%. Gives me more mobility as well. As far as the penetration goes, you can see we do have about 18k. It does say effectively there just because I was a little slow on getting one of my procs up, but we do get about 18k when I'm actively fighting. When I was doing a PvP test with somebody, I was around 14k for most of the fight, which is pretty good. You can see we were around 3700 weapon damage. As far as the armor, we were at max 47k. It was a little bit less. We were around 40k. That is because of the major breach and minor breach that he had on me. But as you can see, we were still way over cap. So even if he did have other sets that were much more focused on getting my armor down, he would not have gotten me under cap at all. This is still a little overkill, but I do like to be safe just in case. So that means you could fight an entire Zerg, you'll still be at max armor cap, even with all the debuffs they could put on you. Now, as far as the consumables, currently I am using Bewitched Sugar Skulls. This gives you about 4600 health, about 4300 stam and mag, and then about 460 health recovery for 2 hours. I was running low on stam during the fight, so you could use something that gives you more stam recovery, but this is what I've been using, and it's been working pretty well for me. As far as potions, I am just using the tri-stat potions. Now, another thing to note about bash damage is not only is it based on your armor alone, but it can be increased by anything that says it increases your damage done. So things like our Black Rose Prison dual wield increases your damage done by 6%, includes bash. Same with minor and major berserk. Weapon damage does not, but things like that do. Or increasing the amount of damage they take also increases our bash damage. Another thing is bash can crit, so if you want, you could run something like Mother Sorrow instead of Veiled Inheritance and try and push up your crit chance. That is another option that you could do. However, I wanted to stay as tanky as possible. Now for the skills. So first up, we are using Pierce Armor. This is from the Sword and Board line. When you hit this, you taunt your enemy, which does not matter in PvP, but it gives the enemy minor and major breach for 15 seconds. That is the main reason why we're using this, for the major breach. We already get minor breach very easily, so if you have another source of major breach that you would rather use, you can use that instead, but you still want to have your sword and board on your front bar for the bashing. Next up, we are using Rune of the Colorless Pool. It is a ranged fear, and it'll stun them for 4 seconds, and it'll give minor vulnerability and minor brittle to the target, which increases their damage taken by 5% and crit damage by 10%. And if it's used against a monster, it lasts for 8 seconds. But the damage taken will affect our bash. If you happen to crit, it will affect your bash as well. So that is very good, but it's also that fear in the footage that you'll see later. I'm not good about using this to stun. I'm not much of a PvPer. I mainly do PvE, and I'm still not really used to this class, so I'm still trying to get used to all the different skills and everything that they do, so I don't use this a lot in the fight, but it would definitely help if you do. Next up, we are using Spite Ward of the Lucid Mind. This is your damage shield. When you hit this, it'll give you a shield for 6 seconds that scales off of your max health. And the first time you take direct damage, it retaliates and deals damage back to the attacker, which scales off of your armor. So another effect why we'd want higher armor. But if you have Crux, which are these triangle things around me, and there's different sources to getting them, but when you hit this, if you have Crux, it will heal you and refund 30% of the ward per Crux spent. When I hit this normally, it'll heal me for almost 20k. It is a very, very, very powerful heal, and the shield's already like a 16k shield for me. So this is a very powerful skill in PvP. Obviously all of that's halved, but even still, they weren't able to even get me super low. I just hit this and I'm back up to full health. Next up, Power Slam. When you hit this, you deal damage to the target, and while slotted, if you block any attack, it'll reduce the cost of your next Power Slam by 50%. And the ability's damage is considered bash damage. It also interrupts if they're casting. But because it's bash damage, it also affects from your weapon damage because it is a skill. So this is why I do want a little bit of weapon damage, because this does actually help boost it up just a little bit more. Now the other morph technically does more damage, but it stuns the target as well. However, when you're testing this, if they're on stun immunity, they don't get that second half. So especially even if you're like trying to test on this boss here, they don't get that second half of damage, so you are losing half if they're immune to stuns. Next up, for our front bar ulti, I am using the Tide Keen's Gaze. This I mainly use just to keep pressure on the enemy. I didn't really use it to actually kill the enemy. The main issue with this build is it does have stam sustain issues, and so when I'm trying to get my stam back, I hit this. This pops up very quickly in my fights. And so I'll hit this when I'm trying to get my stam back, keeps the pressure on them while I can continue. This is our main DOT because we're extremely, extremely bursty. So with this, you hit it for 175 ultimate, and it'll cast a beam for 8 seconds, and it'll deal damage every half second, and it'll follow the initial target. Now it is kind of slow, but it will hunt for a new one if that person is killed. Now there are other options for that, but I'll go over the flex spots later. Next up, we are getting Runic Sunder. This is one of our main skills. Now this costs stam, it's pretty cheap, but when you hit this, it's a ranged attack that steals 2200 armor, so that's another source of armor that we get, and it applies minor maim to the target, reducing their damage done by 5%. This rune also taunts and generates Crux, so this is one of our main things to getting Crux. You hit this, you're going to be reducing their armor, applying minor maim, and getting Crux. So this should be happening all the time. I never had to think about this at all. This was up 100% of the time in all my fights. But while it's slotted, it also reduces your damage taken by 2% per active crux. If you keep 3 crux on you, you are taking 6% less damage. And if you happen to need to heal or something, you can hit your ward and then get your stuff back up, get your crux back up, and then you're back up to that damage mitigation. So that's a very nice combination there. On the back bar, we are getting Recuperative Treatise. When you hit this, it lasts for 30 seconds. Every 5 seconds, you will pulse. And if you hit your class, any class ability that strikes an enemy, it'll deal additional damage and it'll restore magicka and stamina. And it'll generate a crux if you don't have any currently. But the main reason why I have this also is while it's slotted on either ability bar, you gain Major Brutality and Sorcery, which increases your damage by 20%. So we do this for the Power Slam on the front bar, but it is nice for that, restoring magicka and stam. If you do hit them, it does help with the sustain a little bit while you're in the fight. Next up, Rune Guard of Freedom. When you hit this, you gain Minor Resolve, increasing your armor by 3k. You gain Minor Protection, reducing your damage by 5%. And if you're damaged while below 50% health, the Minor Protection is consumed and it'll heal you for a massive amount that scales off of your max health. And you gain 3k extra armor and crowd control immunity for 6 seconds. The immunity occurs every 30 seconds. So this is a very powerful skill, really defensive, and it's amazing and comes in clutch many times in my fights. So this is a must-have, keep that up at all times. Next up, we're getting Crux Weaver Armor. When you hit this, you get Major Resolve for 30 seconds, which increases your armor by about 6k. And while this is active, if you take damage, it applies Minor Breach on the enemy for 6 seconds, and you also generate Crux once every 5 seconds. So this is also major to keep up at all times. This is why the main Pierce Armor is not super important, just because we already get Minor Breach, and this can occur to everybody. So if an entire Zerg hits you, everyone has Minor Breach now. Next up, we're going into the Psijic Order line, and we are getting Deep Thoughts. When you hit this, it is a channeling ability. You can't do anything else while you're channeling this. It's an on-off toggle. You'll heal and restore mag and stam once every second. The main reason why we have this is for that sustain, and also there is a passive down here where you take 30% less damage while you're channeling a Psijic Order ability. So this can make it so that way you are about 95% mitigation from all damage if you are in PvP all buffed up and you're hitting this. It is very powerful. Next up, we're going into the dual wield line, and we are getting Quick Cloak. When you hit this, you gain Major Evasion for 30 seconds, reducing your damage taken by 20%. And every 2 seconds, you'll deal damage to all enemies within 5 meters. And you also gain Major Expedition for 4 seconds, increasing your movement speed by 30%. You could do the other morph of this. It would give you more damage done, but I chose this because the speed is nice to have if you are needing to get out of somewhere very quickly. For our back bar ultimate, I was using the Sanctum of the Abyssal Sea. When you hit this, it gives you a damage shield for 10 seconds that absorbs 60% of all damage, up to a very high number. For me, it's over 100k. And when the shield collapses, it'll deal out all of the damage absorbed as magic damage to enemies within 5 meters over 10 seconds. So it is very powerful if you're fighting a Zerg. As far as flex spots go, because you are really struggling with stam, you might want to get some other mag-based skills that are spammables. Just that way you can kind of balance things out. You could also want to get the Fleet-Footed Gate. This would be a nice way to get a gap closer that's mag-based. And you also get the Major Expedition for 5 seconds, so it's good for movement. You just want something that would be more mag-based. You could also do Xena's Empowering Disc, so that way you get minor resources, recovery, and minor courage. If you wanted, you could do Degeneration, so you get a DOT, and then replace that with your Recuperative Retreat. As far as ultis, you could do Barrier instead of your Sanctum of Abyssal Sea. It's up to you though. This is what I ran during the fight. As far as the CP goes, we are using Resilience for more crit resist. We're using Ironclad to reduce damage taken by 6%. Duelist Rebuff to reduce single target attacks by 6%. And Bulwark to gain more resists when we have a shield equipped. On the red tree, we're using Fortified for more armor. Boundless Vitality for more health. Pain's Refuge. So if you have a negative effect on you, you'll gain 2% damage mitigation up to maximum of 20%. That's very nice in PvP. And then Bashed In, so that way our shield is higher. And then you will want to make sure you get this passive up here to increase your bash damage by 120. And you'll also want to get this one to reduce the cost of it by 90. As far as the passives go, Fated Fortune is nice. It gives you more crit damage and healing every time you generate or consume Crux. So if you are critting, if you put this more in a crit focused build, then that would be benefiting you there. Harness Quintessence will give you weapon and spell damage every time you restore magic or stam. For having the ulti slotted, your damage dealt by status effects are increased by 15% and status effect chance increases by 75%. And then Splintered Secrets, you do gain a bit of penetration for having that slotted. In Soldier of Apocrypha, you do want the Aegis of the Unseen. This will give you almost 2k more armor just for having a Soldier of Apocrypha ability active. Circumvented Fate, you get minor evasion every time you cast any type of Arcanist ability, which reduces your damage taken by 10%. So we'll have major and minor due to the cloak and then hitting any of your other abilities. Implacable Outcome, you gain ultimate every time you consume Crux. You will want Wellspring of the Abyss. This will give you some more recoveries per ability slotted. And then Curative Rune Forms. At each Crux that you have on you will increase your healing done by 3%. Hideous Clarity. When you generate Crux, you will gain more stam, which is great for our bashing. Erudition, you gain more mag and stam recovery by 18%. Intricate Rune Forms would be nice if you had something on the front bar. For the Sword and Board, you will want to get Fortress. It reduces the cost of your sword and shield abilities by 15% and reduces the cost of blocking by 36%. Sword and Board increases your weapon damage by 5% and increases the amount you can block by 20%. Deadly Bash, very important, causes them to deal 500 more damage and it costs 50% less stam. Deflect Bullets reduces the amount of damage you take from projectiles. And then Battlefield Mobility increases your movement speed while you're bracing. In the dual wield line, pretty much all these matter, but the main one I'd get is Controlled Fury to reduce the cost of your dual wield abilities. This doesn't do a lot of damage for us since we're not damage focused, we're armor focused, but it is nice to have. You could also get Twin Blade and Blunt, so that way you get more armor penetration per mace. Now, because we're all heavy, you will want to get all of the heavy passes. It increases your resists, you gain more health recovery and resources when you take damage, you gain more max health, it increases the amount of resources you restore by heavy attacks, and then increases your healing received by 7%. Once again, because we're using the Sigic order, you do want to get Deliberation so you take 30% less damage while you are channeling an ability. All these are also great as well, but you will want to focus that one. In the Undaunted, you will want to get these two. It increases the amount of synergy, the amount of resources you get from synergies, and increases your max pools. In the Assault line, you will want to get Continuous Attack. It'll increase your damage and recoveries for 10 minutes after you capture something. You also gain the Major Gallop. Reach does not affect us. We don't have anything long enough for that. And Combat Frenzy you will want to get, so you generate 20 ultimate when you kill an enemy player. In the support line, you will want to get Combat Medic, so you get 20% more healing when you're near a keep, and Battle Resurrection to reduce the time it takes to resurrect another player. Once again, we are a Nord, which will give you more health and frost resist, more stam, and gain ultimate when you take damage, and you'll get 2600 resists. Make sure to also get medicinal use in the alchemy line so your potions last 30% longer, so that's 100% uptime. Now, for the combat on this is a kind of a tricky thing. I'm still kind of new to it. I don't run a lot of bash builds on the real server. This is on PTS, but there's a thing that some people may not know, which is bash weaving. So just like light attack weaving, normally you do light attack, skill, so on. Bash weaving adds an extra step to that. So you'll want to do light attack, skill, bash, light attack, skill, bash. Now, when you're getting really into the groove, you'll kind of do an even spread of when you're hitting the skills, but everything will be canceled out. So get used to this sound. So that's what the skill sounds like. If you do it properly, you won't even see the skill proc, because the bash is going to cancel the skills animation, and the skill cancels your light attack animation, so the only thing you'll see is the bash at the very end. So when you're doing this, you'll want to make sure everything on your back bar is active, and they all have very long duration, so you don't need to go back there much. On the front bar, make sure your runic sunder's on, so you can steal their armor. They get the minor maim. Make sure your poke is up, so they have major and minor breach. Make sure the Rune of the Colors pool is on, so that way they have minor vulnerability and brittle. And then what you'll want to do is just do your light attack power slam bash, light attack power spam bash. But if you're really good at it, you can do it for every single one of these abilities. So guys, I have a few clips from some duels that I did with this person here. Now, they were the only person I was able to actually duel with. Most people are already making their builds on the live server rather than on the PTS, so I was not able to get other people and kind of get a difference in my combatants. But with this guy, he was a light armor sork. He had tons of shields, as you can see here. Currently, he already had 20k worth of shielding on top of his 30k health. So he does have quite a bit going on. He is running these rune traps, which I was doing a really great job at activating. I don't do PvP a whole lot, so there is some skill issue involved here, but when I first was dueling with him, I was a stage 3 vampire at first. However, the sustain with the stam is already struggling quite a bit, and the vampire just made it so much worse. So I took it off, but before I took it off, when I was the vampire for the first 2 duels, he had won. It was a pretty even game, but I was just constantly running out of stam, and I never was able to get it back up. Even when I used my potion, it just instantly went down again. So once I swapped off of vampire, I still struggle with sustain, so you guys might want to adjust the build to how you like playing. I personally don't mind that much. The stam is only going to be for your DPS. All the other survival stuff that I use is mag focused. The only thing that is stam is your quick cloak here. That's the only thing that's stam. That's once every 30 seconds, so it's very easy to get. Usually your potion will be ready, so it'll be fine there. But this is right after I took off the vampire. I got about 4 clips in here. This first one's longer. I kind of wanted to show off currently how fast and bursty it is through 2 bursts, 3 bursts, and this was with his shield on as well when he first started. So he had 50k worth of shielding and health. We got him real low there, but he started to dodge, and that is the one weakness, is obviously my skill issue. So I probably could have got him there, but after this here, so he put down these mines, and I proceed to step on every single one of them, and he hits his super. But even with all that going on, I do get low, but with only just this one skill here, keeps you alive. So it is a very powerful skill. If you want, you can slot the Magicka Arcanist heal through all this fight. Like I said, this mag is barely used at all, especially if you have 3 Crux for the shield. It's only like 400 Magicka for the cost. So if you want, you can slot a Magicka heal or a Magicka spammable. Basically, for most of the fights, my Magicka was near 100% at all times. So you could definitely use some more there as far as damage or extra healing. But after his ulti ended, and after I had already procced all the runes, we get back up to a more comfortable health. But even halfway, we still got like 20k. And even with all that damage and stupidity I was doing, he still wasn't really able to get me down. And that's only with that one heal. So after this though, we burst him down quite easily. I probably should have kept bashing there, but I ended up swapping to my back bar real quick. But I believe around here, so he's almost at full health, and within a few bash rotations, we get him down. Just like that. So next up, there's just a few more clips here that are showing very quick time to kill with the bash, in some cases, it's almost two shotting him with the rotation. But as you can see, we do use stam quite a bit, so you might want to adjust for that. I personally don't mind as much. You could also like maybe throw on snow treaders instead if you don't want to be constantly CC'd, or just don't be stupid like I am. In that case, I did use the ulti to help kind of burst him down, but if you pay close attention here, it's not really the ulti that's really doing it. I mean, just within that quick little second there, we already got half of his health just from that bash. So the ulti is really just applying about 1k every half second. So it's not doing a whole lot in compared to your bash rotation. We'll check out the stats later, but in the bash rotation, you can do about 10k per rotation from the light attack, the power bash, and the normal bash. But in here, I was running super well on stam. This ulti, he kept running around to dodge that, which was perfect. It gives you good time to activate your meditation if you want to get some of your resources back. Obviously, heavy attack. I don't think I ever heavy attacked during this fight at all with him. Once again, skill issue. I just don't duel a whole lot. I'm mainly Zerg. Pretty quick kill there. He was at full health right at this spot here. And we get one rotation there to half health. After I deal with his stun, the other rotation instantly gets him. And then this one, he uses his ultimate on me. And this is where you can use the meditation as a method of blocking. Since we can't have block mitigation, just for doing your meditating, you get 30% mitigation. And that kind of helped completely balance out the damage his ultimate was doing to me, which normally kind of nukes people. But in that case, it was just lightly tickling me and I got him very quickly. So guys, for the one fight that was very quickly that you saw from beginning to end, the 23-second one, as you can see from our power slam, the bash, and then the light attack, on average, you're going to be hitting for around 9 to 10k. Obviously, if some crits and depending on how your stats are doing, because as you can see, we do get around 17k pen, but we can be around 13. So obviously, depending on how well you're buffed up, and I'm not super great on keeping them up during PvP, but for the most part, around 10k per burst here, and you can do each burst every second. So pretty strong there. You could also just spam bash. Bash goes every 0.3 seconds, so you can get 8k for just spamming bash right out of the gate. As far as our survivability, we were around 42,500 resists, which is very good. No amount of penetration is going to get us down to under cap. As far as what we were taking, he was hitting us hard and it was not really affecting us a whole lot unless I was being absolutely stupid. So as you can see, I mean, each mine is doing 3k, his Haunting Curse about 3.6, his Crystal Frags at 4k, normal frag at 2.5. So he is doing a good amount of damage, but between the mitigation that we have and the one heal, just that one main heal, is just very powerful. I do have a few other fights here just to get a general idea. 5.8, 3k, 1.6. We got another 3, 6.3, 1.5, and also the Deadlands Demolisher. You don't want to forget about that like I just did, so you do actually get a little over 10k on all of them as well, and that's once every 2 seconds in a cone as well, so you don't even need to be exactly on him. So overall, pretty strong. The gaze, like I said, it's doing less than my light attack, but that is per half second, but it is slow. So as you saw in some of the clips, he would just kind of circle around it and not really get hit by it. But that's a great time for you to hit your meditation, get your resources back up, or do some heavy attacking since they're more focused on trying to dodge it. Even though it does less damage than our normal bashing, you can spam bash every 0.3 seconds, which is faster and it does more. So overall, this is kind of a bait to get them to keep moving while you get your stuff back up and going. But still very survivable. On the other fights, we had about 40k, 43k. So for all the fights that I have loaded here, we were very good. And even if he did have tons of things, like you gotta get about 15k penetration just to get me to cap. So there is quite a bit of mitigation going on there. As far as our buffs go, as you can see, I spent 87% of the time with Crux there, 79, 76. So overall, most of the time you'll want to have that up so you get that 6% mitigation. If you do spend it, then obviously on your shield, then it'll be basically free and you get a giant heal and all of that. As far as my debuffs out, as you can see, like I said, I don't do dueling a whole lot. I'm mainly Zerg and kind of leech. So I'm not much of a PvPer. So I'm not great at keeping up all of my stuff. However, this fight was definitely easier, but that's because it only lasted 23 seconds. Sadly, it doesn't show my graph for my stam here, but we can see there is a lot of consumption just from the bashing here mixed in with all of your other stam skills. So if you want, you could swap something out, maybe swap out the glyphs if you want to sacrifice bash damage or something just to get more stam recovery going on. As far as the mag, we're doing pretty good, but that's just because all these last for like 30 to 20 seconds, so you really don't ever need to hit any of them. But yeah, like I was saying earlier, you could throw on Evolving Rune Mend. It'll give you a mag heal. You can throw it up somewhere on your bar. I did move the Deep Thoughts back here and then Color's Pool up here versus the fight. I had not used this. I completely forgot that this stuns the enemies as well as does the debuffs. I was only using it for the debuffs. So that would be also better, give you more mag usage and stun your enemies more often. In the dueling, I was using the other morph for the extra healing, but I realized I don't really need the healing. The one shield skill is doing great. You could also do Xena's Empowering Disc, but it won't give you that stam recovery when you are bashing because you're technically blocking, so you will want to keep that in mind. And if you wanted, you could make your mag pool slightly bigger than your stam. If you did 32 and 32 on your attributes here, this would push your magicka up slightly above your stam, and then you could throw on Escalating Rune Blades so you get a DPS skill that's mag focused. You could also do the other morph of the Cephaliarch's Flail that is also mag focused. However, that would consume your Crux, so that's up to you, but I had not done that. Now, as far as the outfit, for the helmet, we're using the Heavy Fireson helm. For the breastplate, we're using the Heavy House Menard. For the shoulders, we're using Heavy Blood Forge. For the hands, we're using Heavy Night Hollow. For the waist, we're using Heavy Blessed Inheritor. For the legs, we're using Heavy Dreadhorn. For the feet, we're using Heavy Waking Flame. For the mace, we are using Rhetorian. For the shield, we are using Order of the Hour. For the right hand axe, we are using the Fargrave Guardian. For the left hand axe, we're using Sunspire. These are both maces. Technically, I'm just using axes as the looks because I like the look of it. So guys, I hope you enjoyed this episode. This build turned out to be something else from what I initially had planned. Please like and subscribe if you guys want to see more of this content. I am getting super close to 1,000 subscribers, so please help me get there, and I'll appreciate that very much. So have a great day, and I will see you guys next time.